Okay, hello everyone. Hello everybody, and welcome to the GALA webinar series. We're going to start in just a few seconds, just to give everybody the chance to log in. I see lots of people are still logging in, so we'll just take it slow. All right. So welcome to the GALA webinar series. My name is Isabella Massardo, and I'm the content strategist here at GALA. GALA is a non-profit trade association connecting and supporting the global language industry. Today we are going to have a webinar about transforming localization from service into a product that various teams inside a company can use in a programmatic way. Before we get to the discussion, there are a few, let's say, household rules. I know you're our expert in Zoom online meetings and webinars by now, but just to be on the safe side. You are muted, and in theory, you should remain so for the duration of the webinar. The panelists have asked that we open the attendees' microphones if the attendees want to speak directly with the panelists, of course. Otherwise, you can type your questions in the QA box, as you prefer. So if you want to speak directly, please raise your hand or just send us a message and we'll open your microphone. If you have a slow internet connection, your audio may be disrupted. If that happens, you can use the number listed on the Zoom panel to call, or your Zoom notification to call in using your phone. We're making a recording of this presentation, so you will be able to find it later on the GALA website and rewatch everything. If you have questions, of course, technical issues or whatever, you can send me a message in the chat box and I'll help you troubleshoot. Now, let me introduce the moderator and the panelists. The moderator is Konstantin Dranch. He's co-founder and researcher at Custom MT. And then we have the panelists.
Good evening.
Hi. We have Anna Golubiova, responsible for the digital translation capabilities program at Inter-IKEA Group. Welcome, Anna.
Hello, everybody.
We have Iti Sahai, who leads localization at Procore. Welcome, Iti.
Hello, thank you for having me.
We have Bruno Herman, Director of Localization Operations at IKEA. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Welcome,
IKEA.
Bruno.
Thank you very much. Hi, everybody.
And finally, we have Peter Tatishev, Technical Program Manager Localization at Uber. Welcome, Peter.
Oh.
All right, Konstantin, it's over to you. If you want me, I can launch the question, the poll for the.
Yeah, let's have a look. What the audience here today wants to hear.
Okay.
We started this. Maybe Isabella, you launch the poll, and I'll give the backstory of this webinar.
Sure.
It all started with Peter. We were discussing the language data, automation, machine translation, and you know, the things that the localization department can do with their data, because data is the new oil. And Peter introduced the concept of making products inside the localization team, which will be available to other teams. So then I said, wow, that's a cool topic. Let's do something of that. And then GALA invited us to have a webinar, and we have all gathered here. And just in our dry run, I realized how mistaken I was to think of productizing localization and making a product team out of a project team just by doing something with your language data. It's much more multifaceted, and there are so many more aspects to this. I was coming with the idea that like translation companies these days, they try to become IT companies, software companies. There's Yonkers that launched crowdsourcing marketplace. There's the Supertext that made chat translation. You have portals. You have all those people thinking that the future in language services is combining technology and linguistic expertise. And technology makes everything into a platform, a product, replaces humans. So I came in, and E.T. has proved me wrong. Right? She told me, but Konstantin, you're so wrong. You're so wrong. maybe not in specifically this kind of words, but anyway, so we came up with so many ways that I was wrong. And you're going to hear that from, not from me, but from 4 experts that are really driving the localization in important programs and companies. Now, from my point of view, moving to a product is moving to the next step, right? Every time, doesn't matter where you are in the journey, there's always the next step. Maybe at first you automate some basic stuff. Maybe at first you teach some of your first stakeholders to understand what is localization. Maybe you're very advanced. In our industry, every day you hear that I've been in this industry 10 years, I've been in this industry 20 years. So if you've been in the industry 10 years and now you know everything, what's the next step? It's always a nice challenge. We're going to discuss some of this today. And again, hear from the experts, not from me, how they understand, how they view this and what experience they can transmit to you. We have 4 panelists. That means that opening statements would be somewhat brief, but I hope very practical. And we'll take it from there. I hope you guys listening to us right now, I see we have a very nice audience today. You start hitting us with questions and chat, and you at least write where you're joining from and introduce yourself to everyone. And with this being said, Isabella, can we have a look at the results of the poll? It's been out in the field long enough.
Yeah, okay, I'm gonna close the poll. Oops, let's see. And here are the results. So I think you can all see them. What would you like the panelists to focus on? So 39% said which technology they build in-house. 46% said how they advocate internally. 35% which areas they take on in addition to localization. 56% past mistakes in productizing localization. And 51% productizing core activities like translation workflows and machine translation. And finally, 21% a more general overview of their current work. So I'm gonna...
translating this to a ranking, number 1, mistakes, number 2, tech, number 3, advocacy.
Yes. Okay. I'm gonna close the poll.
And no one wants to know a general overview of your work. They probably
21%. Only 21%. I'm gonna close. I'm gonna close and leave it to you.
Great. All right. So, dear panelists, are you ready? I don't hear you. So that's what you do at SpongeBob SquarePants in the beginning. My children watch SpongeBob, and I don't hear you, and this phrase is sitting in my mind. Anyway, so today, ladies first doesn't apply. Bruno, you open. Welcome to the floor. The floor is yours. Let's rock it.
All right. Thanks, Konstantin, and thanks to the audience for joining us for this discussion. First of all, I would like to anticipate a question here. I'm not working from an island. I'm not on vacation. I'm just displaying this background because it's much better than the snowy and windy background in Brussels now. So I chose to be a bit more motivating with a background that should be...
I like snow. For me, snow is the best.
Yeah, I know, but you know, you're one of a kind, Konstantin. So I'm not going to make a general rule. So I wanted to give some people a sneak preview of vacation. Hopefully we can travel again in the future. So what I would like to start with here is to say that I keep saying that I like, and personally I experienced managing localization like managing products. I kept saying, you know, run it like a product. And people were looking at me and they were saying, what does he mean? Because, you know, we are talking here about localization as a team, as a practice, as a center of excellence, but not as a product. And I said, well, no, you don't get my point. I'm not saying that you should really replicate everything that you do from a product management to, you know, localization management. But I think the logic behind it, I would say the objectives are the same. When you manage a product, you want to give the audience something that they can use. When you manage localization, you want to deliver a customer and a user experience. So managing localization for me is first of all about delivering experiences, because there is more than one, we know that. And also the second thing I would like to mention, or the second reason why I call it run it like a product, is that the roadmap is very important. So how you build your team, how you productize, how you operationalize your localization team is very important. And we were talking about mistakes. There was one mistake that I made personally, but I will not make again, which is in the roadmap is to put technology first. It's about people, processes first. These people, these processes must be aligned, must be calibrated according to the business objectives that you have. If you need to deploy your product in, or if you need to deploy your content in 25 different products, that's your business objective. If you need to generate that much revenue in 10 other countries, this is your objective. So I would say that this is really driving operations and also why it needs to be considered as a product. And talking about the roadmap, of course, the mistake, or I would say the wrong decision here would be to say, oh, I'm going to buy a TMS, I'm going to invest in MT without actually knowing why I would like to do it. What should I do with that? Because it costs money, it costs time. So by placing and by addressing the people and the process components of your localization strategy first, you also position yourself in a much better way to leverage your investment in technology later on. So that's a sort of similarity that I can find between product management and localization management, at least if you want to really operationalize your localization efforts very effectively. So that would be my first lesson I wanted to share with the audience today.
Bruno, what about those experiences, right? So localization as a product means that you deliver experiences. What are these experiences? How do you define them? How do you explain to that person, like you told someone not from our industries,
Mhm.
let's say your grandmother mother says, Bruno, what you do? You say, I deliver localization experience. So how would you explain to her next question, what is a localization experience?
Okay.
Who do you
Well,
deliver it to?
yeah, what I would tell my grandmother would be that first, you need to define the customer experiences or the user experiences based on data. So you have to define the profile, you have to segment the people you want to target so that you know if you want to go to a number of markets, what sort of people you want to delight. Because actually, localizing is for me, as I said, delivering experiences, but it's also delighting people locally. And once you have this data available, and once you, as I said, segment, profile your customers in the right way, then you can start shaping experiences that those people can expect. And of course, an experience from a customer in Italy will be different from a customer in China, because those people have different languages, they have different cultures, they live with, they live in different environments, in different ecosystems. So these are the experience. I mean, it's the linguistic, the cultural, and the functional experience that people expect from a product, if that makes sense.
More or less. I know if you develop a website or if you develop an IT product, you can take this canvas of customer journey and you can
Yeah,
look at the different
exactly.
touch points that they have with whatever software you're building, web or
Mhm.
maybe
And, and
mobile
and
software.
yeah, and that's what the roadmap is also all about, because you know that you have to deliver a number of experiences that people expect, as I said, based on the languages, based on the market they are in, etc. And then, as you said, it's a journey. It's a real journey, because then you start developing, building your localization operation or your localization product, just with, again, this objective, which is not only financial, but which is also customer experience based, value based, if I can put it that way.
Good. And so you would tie your localization part with the part of overall IQVIA's activity. So maybe just a couple of words. How does it tie in? IQVIA does clinical trials, if I remember, a lot
Oh,
of stuff for the pharmaceutical companies,
mhm.
and Then there's the part where the localized drugs for different markets. How does your work tie in? How does the work of a localization department inside CRO delight the customer somewhere?
Well, if you refer to the life science industry where I am now, because I work in different industries, this is a regulated industry. So translating and localizing is a must. There is no discussion around it. So if we talk about experience here, we would talk about the patient experience. We talk about the customer experience, and those customers are patient or people being taken care of. That's what life science is all about. But I think it's having, I mean, coming from different industries, what I noticed is that in the life science industry, like IQVIA and other companies, is that patient experience is not that far away from customer experience, because at the end of the day, you have to, again, deliver an experience, which is, of course, for a medication different than from an iPhone. I agree with you. But still, the logic or the sort of value that you need to create is more or less the same. It's what people get from you. And this is what IQVIA does. This is what my previous companies were doing, is really to engage and delight people. And in life science, the audiences are patients or just you and I, because we all, we all need to buy some medication. So if we cannot read, some documentation in our language, would you buy a medication, where everything is explained in Chinese? Probably not. So, it's not that far away. Some people believe that it's completely different, but I don't think so.
Great, excellent. Thank you, Bruno. I definitely wouldn't buy a Chinese drug in Chinese if I can get another one, but if it's a life and death, probably the drug would take precedence. Anna, you're up. Please welcome on stage, Anna.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here. And yeah, as Bruno was talking about people and processes and ways of working, I think in our journey, we indeed started with people. So I think we at IKEA on a global but also local level, we invested quite a lot into how people work with our brand, how they make sure to make it stable, to protect it. So we have quite a lot of knowledge about that. And then, of course, when it comes to translation, localization, there has always been this kind of two opinions, two very strong opinions, or two groups of people. One group that kind of especially in the recent years, thinks that, okay, we can translate by just installing a simple plugin, as we usually do when we go on a website. We just switch the button and translate it to another language that we know. Why can't we just do something very simple and that will solve all the problems? And cost nothing, of course. But then there is another group of people who thinks when we talk about localization or translation that, okay, this is something I don't want to even get involved in. It's so complicated. It requires such a long time. It costs so much money. I don't have the budget. I don't even want to step my foot into it. So by balance or trying to find that balance between the two, two of these kind of different lines, we actually started to talk about multi-language. So a bit different word that maybe is not so much connected to the industry, but when you talk to people outside, then if you talk about multi-language cultural things, then they kind of they are more inclined to and be more receptive to it. So that is when we also wanted to, as we say, democratize translation at IKEA. So not making it so kind of a secret or something that is invisibly done with a magic wand, you just get your translations done, but making making it open, making it something that is actually fun to do, it's cool to do, it's accessible. And of course there we also understood that technology would help us to actually solve some of the challenges that that we heard from that other group of people. It's too long, it's so complicated, it costs a lot of money. So that's where we started to introduce technology, and I think it was happening maybe 2 years ago, maybe longer, when we started to explore the topic, but most actively I would say last couple of years. And it's an interesting journey, and we are still on it. I would say we're still in the early steps for it, but we already see that introducing machine translation, for example, is something that is really helping. Of course, it depends a lot on the different use cases, but in some areas it works pretty well, that we already know of, and we're trying to see how it can help us, how it can enable even more content to be translated, to be available to the customers and to the co-workers. And but then also thinking about the workflows, thinking about this continuous localization process. So it actually doesn't, it's not about the projects, the different deliverables, but it's more about the whole cycle. And and actually, what we talk today about, it's not a project, it is becoming a product where you actually, if you want to localize something, you can just do it from the beginning to end, and it's a kind of a seamless, seamless journey that you are on. It is also reflecting on Bruno's words. I think it is about experience. It eventually delivers you the experience, and not just a file, translated file or translated app, or it's a combination of those all of those things. So so I think that is something that I wanted to share today.
To begin with.
To start with, indeed.
So in a nutshell, it used to be here is your file translation. Instead, today it's here is our platform that that does it for you in a continuous way. So here is how you use it. You don't actually do the file handling for them anymore. This is the internal experience. The buyer of localization used to talk to people and to send them emails. They had this kind of usual office experience. So now they have the experience that they're being serviced by the platform and their users of the platform.
And
I understood you correctly.
That is I would say that is the vision that we have, and we're starting to work. As I said, we're maybe just in some cases we are quite far. For example, in this case where we use machine translation for help desk chats that are located in different areas, and then people can just send their requests in their local language, and then the support specialist can just translate it and answer back, and that works quite well. But then in other areas, we still, of course, need to understand how this platform of having machine translation, the workflow management, how it can support us in the abundance of different content types that we have, and content management systems and other systems. So I think it will be we will be on this journey for some time, but this is the vision that we are working towards, that we don't have to, we just kind of try to avoid all these manual steps that are happening now.
So we know a few successful case studies with machine translation, TMS, and other TMS, and our internal developments. But what about stuff which was not successful? People wanted to hear a mistake. Can you share some mistake from your path in productizing, in moving to a product type of team?
Mistake. I think we could probably, I don't know if it's a mistake, but of course we took quite some time to to probably for the exploration phase, which we could have done maybe quicker. So, and that is maybe something where you start to explore, and being a big organization like ourselves, we always try to maybe to be too cautious, or to try to find the best solution on the market. And then of course, well, yeah, the market actually develops so fast that sometimes it's even hard to do that. So I think that is something that, yeah, a learning from our experience that, that
how long did it take you, if it's not a secret?
Yeah, I mean, we started 2 years ago, but yeah, so I think it's, yeah, it's that time. Of course, some things we started to implement, but I think we could have maybe done it, yeah, sometimes I feel quicker. And actually COVID times, that's what I think stimulated partly some of these accelerations as well, as maybe most of you experience in your areas.
What's the engine of a digital transformation in our company? It's COVID, right? It's a meme that was on the internet so many times.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
Let's move on. E.T., let's start with your opening statement.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I've heard my fellow panelists share their perspective. However, I'd invite everyone to just sort of take a step back and let us assess the baseline definitions of what project management is versus what product management is, and why we're really having even this conversation, right? So, project management, in my opinion, is largely focused on delivery. It's largely focused on output. It is largely focused on the words, the time, the quality. It is the throughput, right? It's the funnel of moving these projects along as fast as we can, as quickly as we can, as best quality as we can, right? And that's the project management perspective, which traditional localization teams or localization managers typically, until recently, I would argue, have been positioned as such in the companies as project managers. And as a result of that, localization is often seen as a cost center. It is this sort of necessary expense that the business has to bear in order to keep things going and to satisfy all the regional stakeholders. The other thing that happens as a result of that project management outlook is that the internal stakeholders for the localization teams, whatever their stakeholders are, be them the regional marketing folks, or even the product teams, they are encouraged, in fact, to see their stakeholders as internal customers, right? And which leads us to a very output focused team. But when we think of product management, product is customer obsession, right? It is knowing your customer better than the customer knows themselves. It is really knowing what the customer does before, during, and after they find you, they use their product, and what keeps bringing them back. And language and localization, it's the first form of personalization when you're going to market in any region. And then we can then dive deeper into the product market fit and the functional capabilities of how you build that product for different regions. But when we think of our customer and the personalized experience we're giving to them, our focus is on outcome. So it's not really the throughput, it is the outcome. What value are we bringing to our end user and in their experience of our product, which makes them fall in love with our product and eventually delights them, right? The adoption is great, the engagement is great. And once we do that, the business, we can, and the business does, see us in the light of a growth enabler. So to recap, project teams are often seen as expense centers, where localization managers are project managers just sort of focused on the throughput and seen as an expense. But product is more about outcome. It's more about the value and the experience you deliver to the end customer.
Yeah, I'm wondering about your story. I mean, what's really cool about you is that you used to work in Hollywood, right? You were in LA and in the movies, in that fabulous industry, and then you moved to localization. So for you, our industry with the language and how it's usually portrayed with number of dictionaries on the shelf behind you. It was cooler, it was more fabulous than Hollywood. That's amazing, right? Tell us a little bit about how you productize, how you package this at Procore. What did you do to? I mean, Procore is construction software, right? You're an IT product in construction. This is very far from office, but still you managed to focus on experience in that type of company. Tell us about your journey.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. In my experience, in my career so far, I initially started out in the entertainment sector, and even in entertainment, even though I was acquiring content, I was localizing that content for an eventual distribution deals. I was also involved in building products for the companies that I was working for. And at that time, which was way back when, VOD, video on demand or streaming, was very new. It was the time that Netflix has just made the shift. And there was a big buzz in the market that this is not sustainable. It's not going to go very well, because we were still used to, remember those DVDs we'd get in mail? And this is, at that time, it was a very US focused business, but we would get 2 DVDs at a time in the mail, and then you'd mail them back in, and that's how transactional the business was. But so I was involved in product all along, and product as a discipline has sort of been more front and center and top of everyone's mind in the last handful of years. But my journey from that spectrum to now localization, I'm bilingual, and I'm a storyteller at heart. And now I believe through technology and through products, I'm able to tell the story to a new culture, to a new region by way of language. So it still continues to motivate me, the storyteller within me, because now language is my tool. And as far as productizing within Procore is concerned, when I started, I was, a team of one. I was a mighty team of one with Eng team, and there was that lack of focus and alignment between what the team wanted to do and the team thought their purpose was, versus the leadership goals, right? So the first and foremost thing that I did was to brand the team. And what I mean by branding the team is to really establish myself as a center of excellence, and establish the mission and the vision for the team. And of course, I mean, that created the space to have that hard, difficult, important conversation with leadership as to what their expectations were, whereas what is the work that we wanted to do. And of course, we found common ground, and but that branding, that mission and vision allowed us to get there, right? So yeah, that was the first step, and then I went on to doing a road show where I created a very lightweight sort of slide deck. And essentially, I see with localization, and even when I've primarily worked on the buyer side, I've had the fortune to work on the vendor side as well to understand the holistic view of the business. However, mostly on the buyer side, my observation is people don't there is a sense of fear or ambiguity and anonymity around the stuff that you don't know. And what you don't know, right? And it is that fear mindset of, I don't know what this thing is. International tends to slow things down, and I don't want to deal with it. But it is educating up and educating across, which can get you places, right? Creating that space and opening that conversation with creating champions internally, getting people to talk to you. And of course, sure enough, demystifying localization has been a huge driving force for me in all my roles. And yeah, going on a roadshow and just having a conversation, telling people what I do, and it's not scary. I'm obsessed with what I do, right? We are all passionate about what we do, but it's just sort of inviting them to that conversation.
Cool. Thank you very much. Okay, the last but not least for today is Peter. Peter, you have a different view from other assembled experts. Let's hear it.
Yeah, totally. It's interesting to see how the topic has transformed since our initial conversations with you.
Indeed.
So what I'm going to talk about is certainly more experimental and definitely, I'd say, more conceptual and more down to earth as compared to what my esteemed colleagues have said before me. And as we're approaching localization as a product, I wanted to talk about the services that localization teams can provide outside of the traditional localization equals translation kind of framework. And obviously, as you mentioned earlier, we have a lot of data. We as localization teams within the companies always have a lot of data. We're accumulating this language data that's not available in this format anywhere else across the company. And since data is branded as new oil, and we want to make use of it. And of course, we're using this as translation memories to optimize the translation process. But what if we take a step back and move to one step earlier? What if we could use this data to help optimize the content creation process? And this is something that I'm interested in, and this is something that we're trying to experiment with. How can we externalize the TM data we have to other teams, so other teams can make use of this data? And the first experimental approach, thought experiment we're doing in some kind of MVP level experimentation is building interactive writing assistant for content creators within the company that will use the TM data we have to provide interactive feedback to the writers. Think Gmail autocomplete for any content creator across the company. And the autocomplete will not be pulling general data out there, but rather using TM data you already have. So if your content creator is working on building or writing something that will be translated into the languages you're localizing for, they will get suggestions from the TM that have already been translated. And if you think about the optimization it can bring, especially if your workflows localize for multiple languages, like at Uber we localize for I think 40 something or 50 languages. And if you can optimize that, the impact to your bottom line ends up being pretty huge. So this is something we're currently experimenting on. I haven't quite seen anything that does just that on the market. So consider this a call for discussion. How can we build a product, not the TMS, not an empty system, but something else that will complement the current localization team infrastructure platform portfolio that will allow us to move from purely translation to earlier stages in the content creation. That's something that can make a huge impact, and it'd be interesting to see how that can be done. We're experimenting with that, building some models, working with our vendors who help us do that. Apart from using purely TM data, we're also working on embedding some NLP functionality in there. One of the funny things we've figured out in the process of experimentation is that an average level of understanding for a MT engine is that of a approximately seventh grade school student. So that's something we're trying to optimize for. If we're working with our writers to help them create content that will be that easy for a seventh grader to comprehend. And if we optimize our content for that, it's much better handled by machine translation engines. That's one of the interesting things we find out in the process. And yeah, so that's my view on the extra translation products that we as localization teams can bring to the table. And going back to what Iti said on product versus project management, I think this is going beyond localization as translation and to earlier life cycle stages of the content within our companies. I think there is a lot of untapped potential right there, and I invite all the vendors and all the platform developers to kind of think in that direction more. The TMS has been there for decades already, but why don't we move to earlier stages?
Just a couple of questions. So I mean, it's pretty cool. You made the translations, you have language data, you can do anything with it. You can make an engine for understanding to help the chatbots. You can have semantic analysis to identify emotion. You can do classification, even natural text generation. Definitely in a big company with many product teams like Uber or any other IT company, and which company is not an IT company right now, you would have multiple teams that work on these models, but they don't have the data, and they don't even know that there is a localization department which has the data, right? And so suddenly, instead of only providing translations inside your company, you can also provide data to all those teams and fuel their experiments with AI. Right? It's pretty cool. My question was like developers, right? Your team, is it supported by in-house developers? Where do you get the, the coders, the program managers, the project managers to bring those systems to life for your department?
Excellent question. So we have a kind of a hybrid model. We do have a sister team, internationalization, which is more engineering driven, and they build a lot of the functionality that we as a localization team need and that we offer to external teams within the company. So a lot of the development happens in the internationalization team, but we also rely heavily on vendors who provide us with both turnkey solutions and solutions that they customize for us. And
so you do have developers that work exclusively for localization, or most of the time for localization.
We do have developers who work exclusively for globalization, I'd say, internationalization plus localization.
Lucky you.
But of course, this is for more hardcore stuff. And the things I'm talking about, they require a lot of experimentation. This is not something that you would set a task to the engineering team to build. This is something that we as localization team rely on our internal expertise to experiment with by meshing things up. There is just so much stuff available out there that you as a non-engineer, not a hardcore engineer, can take and tweak with a little bit of software engineering knowledge, tweak and get some results before you can dedicate more hardcore resources for implementation.
To build a minimal viable product.
Exactly.
Great.
Yeah.
Let's wrap up. We wanted to make a shorter opening statements. We went into longer ones, and we already have some questions coming up. I'm sure there'll be more. Let's start with the ones which are in the chat, and then move over to the QA there. So, Iti, you have the first question addressed to you. And this is a question which I wanted to ask, but I was afraid to ask. So Natalia from FIFA, Spanish translation unit, wants to know about your mistakes. So tell us a story about your mistake. I'm sure you're going to come up with stories, but definitely there has to be some learning experience in the past.
First of all, I don't know, Constantine. Why are you afraid of me? I am the most disarming person ever. But thanks for the question. In my opinion, and it's my fundamental core belief that there are no mistakes, there are no failures. If you are approaching life with an innovation mindset, right? If you are innovating, if you are in a research lab, you are not going to go in the first day knowing that you will do this experiment, you'll set up this formula, and boom, you'll have your answer. So when you're innovating, you go in with the mindset that there'll be more failures than successes, right? So success is a part of failure, and failure is a part of success. If you're having one or the other and the scale is tipping over, that means you're doing something wrong, right? It is integrated. So I rather fail fast and fail forward. I'm a huge fan of MVPs, the minimum viable product. So I rather have something as a test or an experiment done for a beta group or smaller group, release it to the audience or my key group that needs to interact with it, get their feedback, capture their feedback, factor it in, iterate on it, and then keep moving forward, right? So to me, mistakes in the sense of being detrimental to the process or to the work that I'm doing don't really exist. They are fundamentally integrated in success.
So you successfully dodged the question.
I honestly don't know what I could call a failure, really, because I took that as a learning moment, and I moved on with what the learnings were to integrate into my process and turn it into a success. Then share your learnings. Okay, I will share my learnings. So, which ties into one of the questions that is in fact in the Q&A. So as far as my learnings are concerned, I am a preparer. So I like to be thorough. I like to research, prep, learn, and come up with something that is backed by data and is very thorough, right? So in my roadshow that I created for my internal groups, I was of the mindset that let me come up with a playbook. This playbook would have everything from the basic definitions to how the web team can be enabled, how I-18N can be optimized, how UX can be enabled with localization integrations earlier in their process. It was a very thorough idea, right? But that was a gold standard. That was very aspirational. However, I realized that a couple of things. It was taking way too long because I was doing a lot of discovery. I was embedded in their workflows and their processes. So I was doing a lot of discovery and spending a lot of time uh, without really exercising my personal value, which is the MVP, release something in chunks because I was still focused on this beautiful playbook that I'd throw a parade on the main street with drums and streamers and all of that, and then launch it to the larger org. So that was a huge learning because the moment I realized that nobody really, not that they didn't see value in a playbook, but they wanted something now. Because when we think of strategy, when we think of a future focused approach, we need to keep our head in the sky but our ear to the ground. So I needed to get something as an MVP out, internal wiki pages, very lightweight content, digestible content, which was customized towards the audience that I have internally that does not live in this siloed or this bubble of localization, right? To them, localization is a new concept. So that was my learning, and that's how I pivoted from what I learned.
Let's move the questions around. Bruno, you and Iti are both in the same wave. You define moving to a product as an advocacy step, as a perception step inside. So how does Iti's approach and her approach to gaining experiences, not mistakes, but experiences, tie up with your well-structured roadmap that you described in the very beginning? That's a question from Patricia.
Thanks, Patricia, for the question. Well, for me, when I said mistakes previously, I meant that it was actually something that was not as successful as I wanted to be. So I would tend to agree that mistakes and failures are necessary because otherwise you don't know what's wrong and what's right. I think that's my personal approach. But what the way I integrate that in a roadmap is actually, I'm a big fan of the Lean and Six Sigma methodology. Every time I had to build roadmaps for localization, I was inspired, and I even used some portions of these two methodologies to make, I would say, the roadmap as streamlined, but also as tested as possible. And I think one of the things that you do when you manage a project with Six Sigma is that you test all the possible ways of doing things. And well, I can probably give an example. When you get to the stage of the processes, how you define the processes, you need to test probably more than just one, right? You want to test, for instance, if you need in a workflow, in a localization workflow, if you need to include one review step, two review steps, if you need to include SMEs in the workflows or not. So the way I integrated this notion of failure, or this notion of, I would call it test experiments in the roadmap, was actually to say every time we define a process or we define actually a structure of a team, we have to test it. We have to test it with some real case, some business cases, because otherwise you can just move ahead and say, I keep going until I reach my objective, which is probably, the obsession for many people, most of us here. But if you don't really make those mistakes, or if you don't really experiment what you are building along the way, not at the end, but during your roadmap, I think the end result might be not exactly what you expect it to be. So I would say for me, both can be really and should be even really integrated to make sure that there is this culture in roadmap and in, I made a presentation last year, which was called How to Synchronize Localization Operations with Customer Experience Value Chains. And actually, I was showing a slide when I was actually, describing very, very high level way. I was describing one of my, my experiences when I was building a roadmap to develop, first to create and then to develop a localization team and to manage it like a product. And at the same time, on the same slide, I was actually, also including a timeline regarding how you build the customer experience that needs to be delivered at the end. And I was telling the people that my challenges have always been how to synchronize those two motions, how to make sure that, when we created the localization teams running like a product management team, how we could make sure that we were not disconnected from the customer experience experiments, tests that we need to do. And I think that's one way I integrated both mistakes and tests in the roadmap. Not sure if that answered the question, but because it's a huge topic, so I try to.
Yes, advocacy is a very important topic. So I'd like to ping back to our technology advocates on the panel, and I'll go with the question to Peter first, and then to Anna. So Peter, on the chat we see a question from Nikita, and I think Nikita is joining us from Siberia. It must be deep night there. So you have a vision to build this additional products, but it doesn't. It's not actually your daily work, right? You were hired to run localization, but now you're running experiments. You're developing new stuff. You're moving into writing. You're thinking of providing it to more and more teams. How do you sell this vision upstairs?
That's a great question, and I think it has to do a lot with what Bruno just mentioned about MVPs and experimentation. So it always starts with experimentation and starting with something smaller scale, which is where we are at the moment, actually. And but it's a business, so we need to make sure that this is always a compelling business case. So if we're building something, we're not building it for the sake of technology alone, but we need to demonstrate that we're bringing value. And getting buy-in for something like this within a large enterprise company such as Uber requires two things. If you're specifically asking about getting buy-in from higher-ups, a buy-in from higher-ups is not necessarily a buy-in from your users, because we have different, as very often in the product world, we have two different types of stakeholders. We have the actual users who are using whatever we're trying to build, and then we have the decision makers who are deciding whether this is something that can be purchased, something that we can spend resources to build. And to kind of get buy-in from the second type of stakeholders, you need to demonstrate the value to the first type of stakeholders. So you reach out to. We're working a lot with content creators to demonstrate that this is something that's working. We're getting their buy-in. We're talking to them constantly to show that this is something that can bring that value to their everyday work. On the other hand, we're working on the kind of bottom line, if you will, demonstrating how much value it can bring to the business itself. We're not only helping the content creators create content better, but also at the same time, we're optimizing the costs And then once we have this business case ready, we take this to the higher ups, as Nikita called the decision makers, and we present this business case to them. Here is how much we can save. Here is how much we can gain. Here is the experiment results we have, and if this is compelling enough, we can get the buy-in. Of course, the emotional feedback from all ends of the localization spectrum is very much welcome. We can show that the writers enjoy creating content more if we provide them the added value, and we're also creating better content. Not only it's cheaper, it's also easier to understand for target customers. This has actually been a great some great feedback we've had from the regional teams and end users, that the content that we're creating this way ends up being much better in terms of localizability, and it's better consumed by local customers.
Thank you, Peter. It's very similar to how entrepreneurs pitch startup ideas to investors, right?
Absolutely.
You're like an internal entrepreneur who pitches the startup idea to the higher up. Anna, sorry I kept you waiting for a long time, but now let's give you a question from another Anna, Anna Burns, who is the international content lead at Khan Academy. Anna wants to know if having a centralized team is better than having embedded people in departments. You mentioned that you're doing machine translation for the main localization team, and then you're doing machine translation for support content, for tickets or chat. So there's another team, they need support from you. Do you embed your person in there who works on the project? Do you run it centrally? I know also that you have like a product team which uses a different TMS from localization. Do you have your own agent inside that team? Do you keep everything under one roof, or do you have your people on the ground? How do you approach this?
Yeah, thank you, Anna, for the question. I think what we have been doing is trying first to actually centralize, and we have a team now who is kind of responsible for the product, which is then these different platforms that we also try to connect to each other, and that's a team who works on on more the technical side, but also on sharing the knowledge with other parts of organization, and collecting all the different requests. And that is at the moment, but what we see as the demand is growing, and what we are doing also, let's say we are one part of IKEA, which is the franchisor. We have quite a lot of content that is being produced for internal content. So it's a lot of e-learning, different kind of knowledge sharing platforms as well. So we try to actually, as I mentioned, we try to share and open it up to more people. So we share that with so it's not like we have a dedicated person in our department, but there are people who maybe do it as a part of their job, or there is someone who is, if it's someone who is creating content, that they have some sort of guidelines, what they should be aware of when they create content, or if it is a team who works on the web, what happens if they would add languages once they go into a new market. So we try to kind of a little bit spread the topic, and that I think would be the approach for the future. So I would say, it's a combination eventually. At least
you first need to centralize before you can put your people from your team into other teams.
I think so, yeah.
That makes sense. Iti, do you have the same experience? I know you opened the microphone, you wanted to say something. Or is your team centralized, or do you have spies in other departments?
I believe that when you set yourself up as the center of excellence for localization, no matter wherever you're embedded, depending on the need of your business, if you're even embedded in marketing versus product, my role is aligned with product. it doesn't matter, right? Because anytime anyone has a question, a query, or they discovered something that is tied to localization and they're excited to share that, they know who to come to. You need to be that fly on the wall for all conversations, even in the regional sales forums. You need to know where what the pulse of the market is, right? Where are the sales folks trying to get more prospects, so that you can then plan ahead. And if there is, let's say, testing functionality that you need to do in terms of your product or your tools that you use or platforms that you have integrated with for the rest of the business units, you have that ability to find potential time to test for a certain language, and build those capabilities out. And when we think of roadmap, and that sort of ties into a question that was in the chat, that how do you continue to gain that experience and then build on a roadmap? Well, a roadmap, by definition, and in my experience, it's essentially it's very aspirational. It's what you want to do, what should be on the way, in terms of production for the rest of the year. But unless it's a high fidelity commitment, unless it is something that the team is working on in this sprint or the next sprint, it is all aspirational. So the roadmap is created so that you know what is to come. It is not set in stone. You can very much pivot and iterate the way you want to suit the needs of the business. If the strategy changes, then you need to pivot your roadmap, right? Because the goals and the outcomes of the business are going to change. And when we think of strategy, it's sort of the forefront of the questions you need to ask as to why does your team exist? What does your team need to achieve to tie into that North Star metric or tie into those OKRs? But how you're going to tactically, functionally execute it is when the tooling piece comes in. What TMS are you going to use to gain that scale?
So I take it your team is centralized.
Sorry?
I take it your team is centralized.
It is centralized yet decentralized. So there is no, I would say, official structure to it. We navigate it as we need to, as the business need arises. We are embedded.
We're at the end of the hour. Bruno, could you summarize what we learned today in 1 or 2 sentences? I would like to thank the panelists and to thank the question makers. The audience made awesome questions today, very well thought, and some of them go quite deep. I love that. What have we learned in 1 or 2 sentences?
Well, what I've learned, I'm not going to talk for everybody, but what I've learned is that, as expected, there are different views and different experiences on how to, consider or manage, lead localization like a product or productize it. I think the latest example is for the roadmap, which in my view is more than just aspirational. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a job, or my team wouldn't have a job. It has to be really sponsored and well executed. And also to the point, I think that Anna and Peter mentioned, because Peter mentioned content creator, is I would say that I learned today, or I heard today, that there is no localization effectiveness without localization readiness. And that's, of course, that's also related to my point when I said that you need to prepare to set the scene so that you can deliver.
All right. Advocates, technologists, thank you very much. I enjoyed the show. I hope you did too. Great audience tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
very much.
All right, so let me wrap up. First of all, let me thank Konstantin for organizing the panel discussion and moderating it, and most importantly, showing up on time. Iti, Anna, Bruno, and Peter, thank you so much for your insights and your expertise. It was wonderful to have you. Thank you for sharing all that you know. And a big thank you to all the attendees who asked so many interesting questions. We would appreciate it if you could just take a minute to give us your feedback on today's webinar using the post-event survey. It's quite short, I promise, but your feedback will help us to improve our webinar program. Just few GALA news, if I may, before we close. We have other webinars scheduled for the next few weeks, so please go to the events section and have a look at the program. Also, our executive director, Alison, my colleague, Alexandra, events marketing manager, and the program committee at GALA have put together an excellent program for GALA Connected. It's been published last week, so go and take a look, and I invite you all to register if you want to. And for now, I wish you all a good day or a good night, depending on where you are. And I look forward to seeing you at another GALA webinar. Bye, everyone.